GM listeners, welcome to Builder's Journey on the Club Pod. I'm Nicole, your host and co-creator at Seed Club. This week, I spoke with one of my favorite humans in Web3, the mononymous Samsonite, multi-hyphenate, artist, producer, and Seed Club OG. Samsonite's path through Seed Club as an Accelerator alumnus, collaborator, and now producing the Club Pod is a lesson in joining a DAO and finding a community that speaks to you. We discuss what work looks like in Web3 and non-traditional pathways to DAO contribution. It's a great one. Enjoy. Welcome, Samsonite.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Nicole.
Welcome to the other side of the podcast. I'm excited to bring you over here and let you see what it's like. Excited to chat as well. We have known each other for about a year, and we've been getting to know each other's paths through Web3, but I think there's still lots for me to learn, and then definitely some learnings to bring out to the community. Before we dive in, would you be willing to introduce yourself and tell maybe just a slice of who you are in Web3? Don't give it all away because we're going to talk more about it.
Okay. So I'm Samsonite, and I explore Web3, and primarily I'm contributing to Seed Club, actually fully contributing to Seed Club today, and I love it.
Amazing. And you are one of the master magicians behind the podcast. So we appreciate your work and are thrilled by it, and really excited to have you on this side of the mic. Okay, so I think I know a little bit of this story, but would you be willing to tell your Genesis Web3 story, especially as it relates to becoming familiar with Seed Club? How did that all happen? And when? When did it all go down?
Yeah. So it went down in 2020, and there was very few people during this time talking about social tokens, talking about like the word DAO wasn't even really a thing that was being tossed around. It was social tokens, and the people that were playing in that realm, you knew all of them. They were Jess Sloss, Cooper Turley, Brian Flynn, um, uh, Alex Masmej. I mean, he was the OG, and I was really curious about social tokens and was looking for to be a part of that conversation and to join the conversation and just learn as much as possible about it, because nobody, like anywhere in crypto, you couldn't find anything about social tokens. Like it was literally like those people. And then, yeah, I just jumped into some discords, found the Seed Club Discord. There wasn't really anybody in there. It was just them and maybe a few other just lurkers like myself, and just started really learning as much as possible. Yeah, I could go in a lot of places with this, but I'm going to pause there.
So time frame wise, was this during what came to be known as SC01, or the first Seed Club Accelerator cohort? Is that around? I think that was maybe fall 2020, or was it
Yeah, it's
before?
it's it's possible. It's possible that that was happening, but I wasn't aware of that
Mm.
of SEO1. I was just kind of on the fringes, participating in the Discord general chat, and yeah, that's really it.
Cool. And so I knew you were one of the people, one of the rectangles in the Zoom gallery in the second cohort. So I was participating with Ampled, and there was just this person, Samsonite.
Uh-huh.
And, when you first come into any group of people, it's always funny to look backwards because, you know, you see again just like the names on a grid, or in olden days we actually used to meet in person. And so it would just be, people sitting around in a room. And then you sort of like look back and you're like, oh yeah, that was the first time I noticed that person, or like I met that person, but they weren't really on my radar. And so I was trying to get to know everybody sort of in terms of the project. And I guess I'm curious, could you share a little bit about how you came to participate in the accelerator, and what some of your perspectives were? Because it sounds like that was your first accelerator experience with Seed Club.
Yeah, totally. Thank you for giving me the space to talk about this. It's really fun. So yeah, basically, I yeah, once again, anything that had to do with social tokens, I was like interested in, and there was an application floating around to join this new like Seed Club Accelerator, where you could uh, be with these people who are really uh, like leading in this space and get more information. And that was so appealing to me, and so I just like applied. And even though I didn't have a project of my own, but I was kind of like advising my ex-girlfriend's band's project at the time. Uh, yeah, and so I put that as a reference. I believe was like the project that I would be primarily working with in the accelerator. And Jess got back to me. I think we had a call, and um, he was willing to have me on board, like participate in the accelerator, but I didn't really have like a project, you know. He just like he gave me the keys, like, or he opened the door for me, and he was like, "Hey, I see that you're like interested, and come on board." And so I just like jumped in.
Hmm.
So that was my
Yeah, that's cool, and it explains or answers a question that I feel like I've always had, but actually never asked you, of sort of how you came to be in there. And I think that there's a couple actually, learnings or threads there that come to mind, which is, one that I think often Web3 and Web3 success is so much more about the people than the project, or is, if anything, like as much about the people than the project. And so being able to have that vibe check, as we might call it, or, just understand, okay, clearly this person has interests in what we're building and interests in being a part of something. And it's worth, like you said, opening that door and giving the person, you know, access and opportunity to show up, which you did in big part. So I remember you organized these Monday sort of just peer learning groups, which were awesome. And I think honestly, the space for those, for example, has been something that has been valuable within the accelerator since then. And probably something we need to bring back into SEO5 perhaps in a more meaningful way. So thank you for sort of bringing that to light for me in this conversation. And so, yeah, I guess, my question is, at that point, as you started to get to know projects, knowing that like, A, you knew this was something that you wanted to be a part of, B, you didn't have a project at the time that felt so compelling to you that you knew you had to build it, but that you knew that you wanted to build something or be a part of building something in the space, I think is what I'm taking. How did you go from that into sort of starting your slow journey into finding your way into some communities? I think that obviously SEO2 was a great introduction to 10 or 12 communities, some of which have gone on, some of which have evolved. Yeah, what was that process like as far as like SEO2 and then beyond, starting to get to A, see more communities develop in Web3, and then B, think about places that you might want to contribute?
yeah. Okay, so I feel like I'm here now as far as like where I want to contribute. The culture in C Club is fantastic. Yeah, there's a lot here that I could say about that. So nothing's changed, Nicole. It's still been the same. Like I've just like been curious and really kind of exploring who's doing what, and just being along for the ride of like learning like what's happening here, and just as we're all figuring it out. So that's pretty much stayed pretty consistent. That's still like the mindset that I have today. I will say though that what's being created in Seed Club is something that I deeply resonate with, like not just on like a work level, or like, it's but the people that are a part of it, the culture. I feel like the culture is really something special. And yeah, like just opened the door for me, and initially, and there was a bit of a moment there too where I fell for Jess, so to speak. Okay, like because not only is he incredibly a smart person, like he's so, I find him to be like incredibly smart, but also he's like empathetic and funny, and like these are all qualities that I value.
Mm-hmm.
And so I yeah, for me the journey is like really just being around those kind of people. And you too, Nicole. Like I feel like I love your, you know, just you're like non you're very direct, but you're also like yeah, the way that you are, like I really like, these are people, you are like somebody like I would love to just like hang out with, and like, like I would just be hang out, like I would have a relationship, like just hang out with and being friends with. So yeah, the
Yeah, I
journey
think
is
it
like,
is.
yeah, thank you.
Well, it's a treat, and yeah, I mean, clearly likewise. And I think that one of the things that we see within this Web3 space is that we have the ability to work with people and like choose the cultures and communities that we're going to contribute toward. And I think that there's a couple elements there. So, it's not like you showed up in C Club with your resume in hand and said, hello, I'm Samsonite. I can do, project management, production, and, media development or something like that. And Jess was like, you're hired. And similarly, it's not like you saw an ad on LinkedIn and, you know, came into the community in that way. It was this gradual trying on. And I think that right now, and who knows how that will be preserved or not, or how that could be, more meaningfully codified. I think that there's actually a lot of tools that are trying to build out some of those more casual experiences. And I'm here for it. I think that trying to replicate some of these new ways of finding people to work is so critical. But yeah, I think that we all have these like unique superpowers that we can bring to the world of work, and just to kind of the world generally, and provide impact and meaning in this time that we have here on the earth. And I think that the really like special thing is that we that are working in Web3 have the ability to do that with people that also mean something to us and that are aligned along these values. And I think that this is something that we're getting to, define within Seed Club, and we certainly see other communities starting to do that as well. And so, I want to double back on the conversation around justice leadership as well, but I think that what you're naming is something that we actually all really feel deeply, and it's it's not to be diminished.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope, yeah, I hope that I answered your last question okay. Um, because yeah,
Well, I have, yeah, no, I'm gonna take us down that path. So yeah, you also mentioned justice leadership, and as somebody who has led organizations and groups and collectives of people, when I first came into Seed Club and met Jess and sort of saw how he was starting to welcome people into the work, I was like, oh, this is like, he is so good at this, at like making people feel seen and noticed. Like you said, like this deep empathy, seeing and believing that everybody has something special that they can contribute. And then so importantly, giving the space to do that. And so I think that, like, for example, with him bringing you into the accelerator, it's like, all right, well, there's this guy Samsonite, he's in the Discord, clearly he's super into it. We don't know what project he has or how he's going to contribute necessarily, but he should clearly be in the accelerator. And so, you know, there you were. I think what I'm curious now to explore a little bit more is, how you have started to build your role as a contributor, because I think that that's another piece where people often have questions. And, this is builder's journey. And so there's, building a community, certainly, but I think that there's also sort of building a role or building your own personal journey in Web3. And so I would love to actually go back in time, even a little bit before you found out about social tokens, and learn a little bit about the other work that you've done prior to Web3. And then I want to sort of fast forward to now and talk about that. But who else are you other than the Samsonite that we know now in Seed Club? Or what other types of work and creation have you done?
Yeah, so nothing traditional at all, ever. I've always just done whatever I've been attracted to and curious about. So something when I was a teenager, it was skateboarding. Okay, I skateboarded that was my thing. Like I was way into skateboarding, and then skateboarding got me into music because music and skateboarding, you make a video part and then you put your
It's
song to the video part.
yeah.
It's a whole culture, it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
And then music was like a huge thing, and I was like, oh, all I want to do is put out an album and tour in Europe, and
I love that tour in Europe is put an album and tour specifically in Europe. I like
yeah,
that.
that would be a thing. And also the dream was to be on this one label that I was in the community in San Francisco during the time, which was 2008, 2009. There was a huge punk scene in San Francisco, and yeah, just a bunch of underground uh, bands, and there's this label in the scene during that time, and yeah, so the dream was to be on that label, and anyway, that happened, and so I was a touring musician for 10 years, and put out records and did everything because you have to do everything.
Yeah.
It was a grassroots label. It wasn't like a major label. It was a great label to be a part of because there's a lot of meaning and all the right reasons, but it's not easy to break through. And then breaking through was a question what am I doing this for? I to make a money and to make the art, it's kind of sucking the joy out of it. And I started to feel my age, no longer in my 20s, just all these things kind of coming up. So then, um, yeah, I was like, I just want to make a shitload of money. So I have this space to really be able to just explore myself and explore the things I'm interested in and make things.
Hmm.
And and that was crypto. So then I got into crypto. Yeah, and for that reason, just to make a shitload of money. And that's that I got in 2018, and I was living two lives almost, where there's
Hmm.
learning about how finances and markets work, and then also just primarily more interested and focused in art and creativity, the creative process. And and it wasn't until I found out about NFTs in the end of 2019, early 2020, where I was like, wow, here is something where the crypto meets the art, and it's more than just you know, number go up. It's oh, this is a whole new way of doing things. And then discovered social tokens, and then that was when it was wow, communities could actually you know, a lot of idealism of what this
Hmm.
stuff could turn into potentially. And it really got me off, and that's when it turned from the primary aspiration being just make a shitload of money to, wow, how can we actually like build this future for artists and creatives to actually be able to make this like the art without having to worry or like depend on the money aspect, or for that to be not such a thing, because it was for me. It started to become a thing, like was like I need to like make money. So okay, I'm just gonna try to slow down here for a second. What did I learn along the way, or like what were like some uh, tools or something, like, well, knowing how to record, uh, you know, booking my own tours in the United States for some time. Um, yeah, so some business stuff in a way, like with the band, because I managed everything. It was like,
Right.
yeah, so that carries over.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate now that you're just interviewing yourself. It's great. You don't even need me.
Sorry, no,
um,
I do.
yeah, well, I mean, obviously you know where I was going, which is, I think it's been super interesting watching everybody's path within Seed Club. And, I think that I first came to the idea of bringing you on because you were in that second cohort. Like I said, I didn't actually really know because I was in it myself. I wasn't running it yet. I was also in it. And so all I knew was sort of that you were there, but not like the why. And it sort of seemed like at the time I almost sort of felt from my perspective like you were already part of Seed Club, because you had been there, and then you started holding those Monday sessions that were like the peer learning groups. And so I think there's something to that. I make the joke that about myself that I basically came to the Seed Club party and then just never left. I think actually maybe you're also guilty of that. And so can you talk a little bit about what that process of like how you posted up on the Seed Club couch and then just continued to stick around? What were the different ways where you started plugging in? And also, what were the different ways where you started to see the value that you could create? Because I think that like that piece is so key of, there's a million things that can be done in a DAO, but I think that the magic is when you find that intersection between what you can contribute and what the DAO, or really any community of people, meaningfully needs. And so what was that process like as you started coming in and finding different ways that you could contribute within Seed Club?
Yeah. So it was really about jumping in, getting familiar with what's happening in the space, uh, within the community, and just finding pockets of like where can you add value and contribute, right? So add value, that was like, that's always like, yeah, where can I be useful? um and it's a different question than like, hey, hire me, or like, like, or I guess that's not really a question, but like,
It's a different
or like,
mindset.
yeah, it's a different mindset. It's like, hey, I'm interested in this, in this community. I want to sit on the couch, like you said, and just and be here. But where does that make sense? And so yeah, a lot of it was just being consistent, and with like being a part of the conversations that were happening, showing up to all the calls, um, and just sitting back and watching and learning, like, okay, where could I add value, and like what do I have that I can contribute? And it was, for me, it was like, well, I could totally do a podcast. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that, a big piece of that process is also about like A, taking risks, and B, improvising thoughtfully and like knowing how to improvise and kind of like read the chord changes. And I spent a bunch of time at Berkeley likening the musical journey to the entrepreneurial journey. And so clearly, like, there's similes I can't quite quit. But yeah, I think that I see both of those of like, just kind of reading the room and seeing like, okay, this is what's going on here. And so I can insert myself here, and then anticipating like where the group is going to be, of like, and sort of being there at the same moment that the group gets there, or like, if anything, like if better before. Yeah. So I think that there's something to be said about both of those pieces. And yeah, I guess I'm curious, like I have a hunch, but I'm curious on your take of this. Like, how much do you think that there should be sort of like, how much friction do you feel like is the right amount of friction? And like, is there a point at which, a person, if they're feeling too much friction, maybe it's not the community for them? Like, how do you kind of know? Did you try on, I mean, it sounds like you were kind of a Seed Club maximalist, but did you try on other communities? Yeah.
I love this question, Nicole. This is a great question. This is cool. I love your questions. You're so cool. So yeah, like I did. I mean, I explored. I was just, so I was a part of the whale community. Whale was like
Oh,
the
right.
first
Yeah.
social token. That's like a huge. the- They don't get enough credit in my mind.
Shout out Whale.
But yeah, really, they were probably the most together social token out of all of them, I would say. Like, yeah, until FWB came along and really kind of like stepped up to the plate.
Mm.
But yeah, so uh, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Well, how did you try on different communities, and how did you know
Right.
when you landed on that one couch? How did you know like that was it? And how
Yeah.
much friction, and like how can a person know that that's the right place for them, or that
Yeah.
it's not?
Right. So a lot of it has to do with just like checking in with yourself. Like, how does this feel? How do I feel being a part of this community? Like, are these people who I like genuinely like want to hang out with after work hours and like hang out with, like be friends with? Or are these people that are just like, hey, I'm just kind of just doing this job, get this paycheck, freaking whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, I explored other DAOs and communities and stuff, and just the culture primarily, just kind of sat in on the culture and just like, how does this, you know, does this resonate with me or not? Does this resonate? And with Whale, it was like, it was a really great learning experience to like learn from from Whale Shark primarily. The community I didn't really resonate with. It's kind of not really my, yeah, it just didn't really work. It didn't really click with me. And so just noticing that, so noticing like what's clicking for you. And for me, like once again, when I had that conversation initially with Jess, and just like Jess, like, I told you I fell from a little bit, like that. Yeah, those, there were like values aligned. You, Nicole, like, yeah. So and I noticed like, that this resonates with me. This is a community that I want to be a part of. Like, yeah. And now seeing the other people that are coming through, it's amazing to see how these initial core values and stuff are starting to really blossom into like, most people who are now contributed to C Club carry these values as well, that like, that I would want to hang out with and be with, like, um and yeah, just hang out with after hours, whatever, after work hours and stuff.
Yeah, I think it's this interesting piece because I don't know, this is maybe more of just my own personal editorial, but I think that there's this interesting tension currently right now in our like general society of whatever stage of capitalism we're in, where there's a full questioning of work and like work's place in our life. And I think that we've gone from a place where we've gone from a place where you work in the same job for 40 years, 50 years, retire, and like that's it. I think we've gone from a place even where our jobs are supposed to sort of like uniquely define us, and sort of like where your meaning is to work, sort of this like puritanical idea of capitalism where like you exist to contribute to sort of work generally. And so I think it's interesting to kind of see this divergence of questioning of sort of work's place in people's lives. And I see both, and I somehow, while I think that they're like competing, I actually don't necessarily think that they're exclusive of each other. So like there's this like work is not everything. Like this sort of like your job will never love you back. So like don't be dying for it. And that's definitely like I think an important piece for people to understand that like there's more to life, right? But then like simultaneously, especially within Web3, obviously this idea of wanting to work with people and toward a mission that actually does mean a ton to you in your life. And I guess I'm curious what your take is on sort of those two themes that I think people generally are exploring right now in this like weird thing where like you can't find any workers and yet there's high unemployment. And I think we're just in this very like curious place with how people are now seeing work. And yeah, I don't know. What is your take on that?
I love that question. It's such a good question. Um, because I mean, yeah, I've never done anything that doesn't resonate with me as far as like spending my time. Like I've only mostly, yeah, been focused on stuff that like really resonates with me on a meaningful level where I'm like, yeah, like this is what I want to do, even if it meant like that I was eating top ramen or like, like that's one
Mm-hmm.
of I cannot I will not work at like Facebook or Google, even though my sister, okay, much love to my sister. She works at Facebook. She's
We love you,
she's
Sister
cool. But my
Samsonite.
but she sets the example to the rest of the family, like, oh, why don't you be more like your sister? Like get a job at like, like but meanwhile I'm just like uh a bit of an outcast, like a bit of a like, just doing the music stuff that's not really valued by society and yeah, so the meaning of work and yeah, like you said, the stuff that's happening here in Seed Club and just in the whole Web3 ecosystem, I resonate with deeply. Like deeply where it's like this could shake up a lot of norms that we're used to as far as like with work and just how we interact and how there's a lot of idealism here, but it embodies the ethos of like disrupting and like punk and just a
Mm.
lot of stuff that I back and I feel like is I, a lineage that I feel a part of. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah, it makes me so happy to see people ask themselves this question about work and stuff and really challenge these like expectations and really go deeper and explore that question. That makes me so happy because I love when people get their minds blown. It makes me happy, and I love getting my mind blown.
Same, same. And it's one of my favorite things of uh, working in Web3. Although I do, at the same time, very much believe that like we are more than our work. It's a complex. I can hold two truths at the same time.
Yeah. Okay. I
Um,
love that, Nicole. If you don't mind, can I just? I'd love to speak on one more thing about that
yeah,
because I agree.
please.
Like, yeah, like we're more than our work. It's true. I wonder if it's possible to find work that doesn't really feel like work, but we're contributing to like some, a deeper thing. I think that's definitely happening to a massive degree here, more so than like traditional like companies and stuff. Like, yeah, there's a lot of like traditional work that needs to be done. But when you're an owner in it and you're like contributing to this thing that's like bigger than you almost, and like it just changes.
Mm.
It changes. For me, it changes. Yeah,
I think that that's such an important call
yeah.
out and an incredibly obvious one that somehow we hadn't talked about yet, right? Of the ownership layer on top of it. And I think that that's something that largely has been unexplored. And like when you look historically at, just like the trajectory of co-ops and unions and worker owner, worker powered companies, obviously they're far and few between. And yeah, this concept, I do think that there's a sort of in-between layer there of, or like perhaps that's actually the way that you reconcile those two pieces of like being more than your work, but also feeling really aligned with the work that you're doing. And yeah, when you own it, it really changes the relationship that you have. And I think that it's a good call out. I wanted to talk a little bit about, I actually don't know the answer to this question because there's so much now happening in Seed Club. We've done such a good job of opening the door and inviting people onto the couch that there's now many couches and many rooms that I don't actually even have time to visit on a regular basis. So because you are the person behind the podcast curtain, working on all sorts of exciting developments, I'm actually curious what is coming next, what types of things. So, I think that we've spent a lot of time talking about how you got here, what you've brought to the table in your Web3 journey, and how you've built this role for yourself little by little of exploring what you bring from your past work, what sort of emerged in different ways, and how that sort of, met Seed Club at the right time in the right way. But what's next? Can you share any exciting developments in the Seed Club podcast plus beyond extra galaxy world?
Yeah. Well, right now we've kind of fairly recently stood up the podcast and are standing up the media end of things. We have some other contributors at Pandy and Crypto Honey now, who I'm working closely with, and so we have this media arm that is, like I said, just standing up, and so it's really kind of like the scaffolding has been built, the walls are going up. It's really we're at a point now where it's like starting to design the space and really make it like shine and like be something beautiful is the idea. But it's and so we're on our way to doing that, and we're just on so many different fronts. So like there's the podcast element, there's a newsletter on the horizon. There's a lot of different things in the media side of things where we're really the intention is to take all the learnings that are happening within Seed Club, within the Accelerator, and to be able to use this media arm to share that and to really get that out there in ways that are interesting, fun, creative, not the norm. Want to shake up the norm of like how we traditionally, receive media. Like so, these are all things happening conceptually, but also in reality.
I'm excited. Are we going to go into the metaverse at all? Has that been explored? No comment.
Not yet, not yet, but maybe soon. Yeah. Does my last response answer your question? I'm wondering if I could
Yeah.
be more tactical. Like,
I mean, if you
what are we
have any
doing?
more, I literally don't know. I mean, you tell me if, I guess
Okay.
I can't tell you whether that's a good answer to the question because I don't know if there's other pieces. But I think that I think that the media piece is a good call out. And I think that probably for a lot of people, they don't necessarily know or see that the podcast is going to be within a bigger ecosystem that's being built. So I think it's exciting.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I would love to share a few more things about it, just to really kind of, I want to get out there what we're doing. So,
Tell me, what are you doing?
Yeah, this DAO contributor series, and um, it's great. We have like a lot of different people that are really deeply contributing to the ecosystem and putting a spotlight on them. We're about to launch season two, so there'll be a revamp of uh, like art direction and everything like that Peace Node's doing for the podcast. And next week I have my first meeting with this gent about potentially like doing video stuff. So we might do like some video elements. And so really, like I said, just kind of standing all these things up right now and like really that's kind of where we're at and building out. Yeah.
Did you imagine this
Thank you,
time
Nicole.
last year when you were just hanging in the Seed Club Accelerator that you'd be like building the media arm or that there would be a media arm for Seed Club? Was this all
Not at all.
part of the master plan?
No way. No way. No way. But it's been fun to just jump in and yeah, improvise and to just go with what is happening and to see what happens. I love the spontaneity.
Yeah, same. Okay, before we sign off, other than Seed Club, the Seed Club Discord, where can we find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, on Twitter, that's where I am on Twitter, and then so that's I think it's a Samsonite with three A's, so Samsonite, and yeah, that's it. And on the C Club Discord, you can find me in there.
Yes, we can. You are on top of all of that. You are great at pointing people in the right direction, which I always appreciate as people get lost or have questions. You're often there lending a friendly answer.
Cheers.
Well, thank you. Thank you. This was super fun. Appreciate it. And see you soon.
Thank you, Nicole.